Angular project file structure. So in this video, let's take a look at the file structure of a typical Angular application. We'll look at some of the config files, project files, source files, and the end-to-end test files. This is the directories and file structure of the application we were building. If you look at here, the very top level is the root directory of the project. Within this project, there are three top level folders. The first one is the E2E, you see here, for the end-to-end testing. And then we have the node modules. This is the large module folder that contains all the packages. And then we have the SRC folder, which contains all the source files. So let's take a look inside the project root directory and let's check out some of those files. In there, we'll find a bunch of files in here. All these are the application configuration files. The top one you see, top two there, these are just basically for configuring the code editor and configuring the Git account. If you have Git repository, remember in the previous video we turned off our Git repository. So if you want to manage that and manage your source control, that's what you need to do there. The Angular.json file, that is the CLI configuration files for all the defaults, and you set that for your project in this workspace. The browsers list, this is used primarily for sharing, or if you want to eliminate or set any target in the browser. For example, some old browsers may not be able to run Angular, so you want to disallow those to run. So if you set some of the settings in there, then the final bundle will either increase or decrease based on the setting here. The Karma is just used for unit testing. Package JSON file, these two are really important. Okay, so just make sure they are included in your application. The lock JSON file, that's used for version information about all the modules you install in the nodes module folder. The package.json file is the metadata that is used to configure your application. It also contains all the dependencies for this application. The README is just a markdown file for information about how to use this or install your application. The last, or the two tsconfig files, these are for TypeScripts. The first one there is for configuring the compiler, because your Angular applications are written in TypeScript, so they need to be compiled to JavaScript. And then the spec file, that's just for, again, testing, unit testing. And lastly is this tslint here. This is linting only for managing your code, make sure your codes are nicely written, consistent, and so on. So those are the app config files. Now let's go into the E2E folder and take a look at what those files are. Here you just have maybe 3 files initially, but again, if you're not doing any end-to-end testing, don't have to worry about this. But if you do want to run this type of test, that you go in here and set up this file to test your application. So end-to-end testing is not the same as unit testing. End-to-end is used for testing your application functionality as a whole, rather than you testing each unit of code, right? So that's for that one. And then the node module, of course, we don't know that. So let's take a look at the app inside the source folder. So in the source folder, in the root of that folder, you have about 5 files to begin with. And the favicon is just the logo you use for your application. But the 2 most important files are the index.html and the main TS files. The main TS file is the main entry to your program. The index file is the single page application. So all your Angular components will be rendered into this single file. So you need just one physical file to manage all your application. It's pretty cool. The polyfill is just to use to provide any code that, again, some browsers may not recognize. So you do that, like browser animations, things like that. And the test is used for unit testing. Then let's look at the app folder. The app contains the source code, or mainly the application components of your Angular application. And this is where the Angular View model fits in here. So as you can see, we have the first file is called the routing module. This is when you initially start creating your Angular application, it asks you if you want to use the routing or not. If you check yes, then this file would have been created automatically. If you check no, then this file will have to be manually created by you or later. Okay, so that's for your routing modules. They will have the component CSS. This is just the external style sheet for this component. So as you can see here, all these are just one component called app component. Okay, And then the next one is the HTML component. This is the template or the view, right? And then we have the spec. Anything that you see the word spec in it is just for unit testing. And then we have the component.ts file. This is the component or the source, right? It contains all the logic or the business logic of the application, also known as the controller. And then finally, we have the app module. This is the module that contains all of these components or files into that single component. In this case, this is the root component and then the root module. Okay, so let's look at the assets and the environments. The assets is mainly used for any static content like images, any CSS files you want to use, any other information or JavaScripts, right? All those stuff can put in there. And then the environments is used for configuring your development, right? When you're developing your application, you will set up inside the environment.ts files. When you're running in production mode, and we'll use that inside the production.ts. So that's pretty much it for the Angular files and structures. Of course, the files will grow, and you will have nested components inside all those app and components folders and so on. But let's go and take a quick look at the files in the application we just created and see what that looks. So I'm going to go to the IDE here. So here we go, back in here, inside the root directory here in the front end, we have the mean stack agency. As you can see, these are the config files out here. So really important. And then inside the E2E, just for the end-to-end testing here, the node modules, that's going to be really huge. So that's important. And then this SRC or the source is where all the source or the of your application lives. So here's the main TS, and then the index here. So this is the root or the single page applications. You can see here, anything that is static for your entire Angular application can be put here. Now you see here in the body in line 11, there is a special tag called app-root. This is not an HTML tag, it's an Angular tag, right? So Angular tag that Angular will bootstrap the entire application to this particular tag. And so all your components, all the views will be rendered to this tag, and that's important. So that's the single file. And then the main TS is the main entry to your program. Here you see a lot of stuff here, but one of these is called the app module. Remember, this is the root module. Inside the root module, there is a root component. So you import that component to the module. You export the module out to this main program, and then this program then bootstraps this module to the browser, and the browser is to this HTML file, and then it runs that on the browser, and that's how it works. So so this is pretty much how the workflows work in Angular. And if you understand this logic, then you see that it's not that complicated to create your application. And later on, when we actually go on there and create our own components, you'll see how things will be structured again, and hopefully that'll make more sense in how this logic works. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to explore the anatomy of an Angular component.